Hello. Today we will be reading a fan fiction by Nathan Jones. We've done one whole fanfics before. She wrote the The Was with Kurigyu, the character from Danganronpa. But today we're doing Alone in the City of Love, French ex-reader one-shot. It's almost as if the road was silent at that moment. Loneliness consumed my body as I stared out into the waters. With a heavy sigh, I put in my headphones and lulled myself to the sound of the music. The great city, the sights to behold, but coming here alone was so dreadfully tiring. Although there were people around here, of course, their presence felt so absolute and transparent, it wouldn't have made a difference if they weren't here at all. I had always seen the maze of places, of course. That was the first thing I did. But what now? The museum? The tower? The river? But nobody to share it with. Why had I come here again? For vacation, right? I couldn't seem to remember as I found myself more and more engrossed in the music. Someone stepped beside me to admire the river as well, but they didn't make a sound, letting me tune out the presence as well. As I leaned over the bars, I found myself letting out a sigh. If only I wasn't here alone, maybe I wouldn't be so depressed. My parents were too busy to make the journey, and I didn't have any friends to offer a ticket to. It's not like I didn't want friends, but I wasn't very good in social situations. I always seemed to make things awkward. The song slowed to an end, and I finally took a glance at the person beside me. It was a male, smiling to himself. His eyes seemed too lost, so far away. The glittering water reflected in his bright eyes. It was almost beautiful. I started, putting my headphones out. Although I didn't mind staring, I didn't want to seem creepy. But what did I even say? He blinked, pulling himself from his thoughts. The male moved his eyes towards me, and his smile grew wider. With a light sucker, he brushed some of his blonde hair from his face. "It is beautiful, no?" he wondered out loud, voice deep with an accent. I could only nod, looking back to the river. After a long pause, I returned to him. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bother. You looked like you were thinking about something. I'll leave you be." I began to fold up my headphones to put back in my pocket as I felt a soft toss on my shoulder. My heart nearly skipped a beat, and I flickered my gaze back to the man. It wasn't like I liked him or anything like that. I just wasn't expecting to be touched. He laughed again, waving it off with his other hand. "Please, you are no such bother. I'm interested in talking to you." "Why do you look so, ever so alone, my dear?" He tilted his head, lowering his eyebrows in a sad look, thinking. I crossed my arms and shrugged slowly. The man lowered his arm and grabbed onto the rein again. Pardon my asking. Of course, you don't have to tell me. I'm a stranger to you. But I'm simply curious. You're a tourist, aren't you? The man gave a gentle sigh, resting his cheeks on one of his hands. "I'm lonely too. It's too hard when you live as long as I." The words made me ever so curious. I couldn't just leave now. Moving a bit closer, I leaned beside him. All right? I'll spill my story if you do yours. But first, what's your name? I was met with silence for a long time, and I was almost convinced he wasn't going to tell me. As I looked over his face, he seemed to be trying to remember something. Suddenly, he closed his eyes. Ah, Francis. Breathe rain. Call me Francis. Some of his hair fell over his eyes again. I was a little surprised to see a man with such beautiful hair. Better than most people I knew. All right, Francis. Elena. It's nice to meet you. You live here, right? I offered my hand out for him to shake. Francis looked at the gesture carefully before taking my hand with his gloved ones and squeezing it gently. Shaking and greeting, I pulled back. So what's the story? You got me curious and everything. It has to be something crazy. He clicked his tongue before shaking his head. None. Not yet. Mine's a little bit special. He grinned playfully. Please, let me hear yours. Curious and slightly irritated, I couldn't hear it yet. I agreed to begin with mine. All right. I'm a foreigner. I began slowly, looking out the river. Romantic boat rides drifted through the water. Soft music playing above. I live a normal life, I suppose. I have a job, and I have kind parents who look out for me. They work as well, but I don't have any friends, I admitted with a shrug. Too far. You see, I guess I'm not too good with people, and I end up chasing away most people I talk to. I'm usually alone. But I always had my parents to make up for it. But I ended up saving enough money to take time off work and travel. I've always wanted to come here. I felt my grip tighten on the bars as excitement took over before I returned to sadness. I mean, the lights, the music, the sights. Who wouldn't want to visit such a beautiful place? But my parents weren't able to come with, so I ended up buying a single ticket for a long trip. It's a great place, France is, but when you're alone, I trail off. Slowly looking back to him, Francis nodded, returning my gaze. I agree. Such a beautiful place. To be there with loved ones. I don't have anyone like that either. He forced a smile, but regret was obvious upon his face. Alas, it's not like I haven't tried, but I'm much like you. People just don't understand the love I could give someone. His voice grew quiet before he reached into his jacket and pulled out a nearly perfect red rose. Apparently he just wants around with roses in his pockets. Yeah, that's normal. His fingers traced the stem before it was suddenly awkward in my direction. I didn't know what to do. Only staring in surprise. That's for me? Hesitantly, I accepted it, taking it into my own hands and holding it close to my chest. Thank you. It's beautiful. I gave Francis a bright smile of gratitude. It's sad you haven't found anyone yet. I personally think you're very nice. The man chuckled, looking to his feet. That's kind of you. It's my turn though, isn't it? Will you care to accompany me on a walk as I explained? He stood up straight and offered his hand. Now, my parents have warned me of strangers. It's so, and not to go off with one. But I was an adult now, and I want to trust my judgment. Nothing about Francis scared me and made me want to escape the situation. So I reached out and took his hand, letting him lead me down the sidewalk. It was a while before he opened his mouth to speak, not letting go of my hand for even a moment. He didn't squeeze too tight, and he didn't pull me, so I didn't really mind, but it was a little embarrassing. In some ways, it felt like I had known him all my life. Do you remember what I said? He spoke. Remember? You're talking about what you said after my story, right? Are you going to tell me now? Francis was silent. Then a smile peeked at his lips. You must be hungry, oui? I found him chasing the subject, but chose to stay quiet about it. Oh, sir, but you don't have to get anything for me. I squeezed his hand lightly to confirm my words, but he quickly shook his head. I want to let you stay hungry. Please come. With a laugh, he pulled me towards one of the many shops along the road. I was sure he didn't even check where he was going. Finding ourselves in a cute-looking candy store, putting his gloved hand away, Francis hurried to his shelf of assorted candies, obviously pretending to be interested. I couldn't decide whether to approach him or not. He said he would tell, but he was trying to avoid the topic. I took a deep breath and moved closer to the man. He didn't even turn to look at me when I slipped my fingers through his. Don't you have to tell me? You know. I tipped my head to look over his face. Francis chuckled, squeezing my hand back. You're ever so kind. He moved his hair out of his face again, without warning. I was pulled close and embraced tightly. The hug was warm, somewhat comforting. I closed my eyes and returned the embrace. I felt a tickling on my cheek and neck because of his hair and let out a light laugh. When he finally let go, Francis looked back at the candy. Oh, damn you, he started slowly, lowering himself to a knee to see the bottom cells. I'm much older than you, or anyone else in France. Have you an idea who I am? He reached out to grab a handful of candy. I shook my head. No clue came to mind. You say you're really old, right? You look so young though. Are you a vampire? I sat beside him. It's silly that I believe he was actually really old. But playing along or actually believing it, I wanted to hear his reply. Francis chuckled, suddenly handing me half of the pile he grabbed. For you. With the rose in my hand as well, I moved the candy to my other hand. Are you really paying for all of this? I really don't need any. Being caught off with the man. Holding his fingers to my lips, he grinned brightly. I want to. With that, Francis stood and offered his arm down. I was still a little uneasy about all the kindness I was being shown, but if he really did want to, I guess I should just accept it. Hooking my arm in his, I was pulled to my feet and led to the counter. After paying for all the candy, we were given a bag to put it all in. I sipped the rose inside as well and offered to hold the bag as he continued walking. Taking out a small chocolate, I took a bite, looking at the river. Have you lived here all your life? I wondered out loud. The blonde nodded, reaching over to grab a candy as well. All my life. or more like, he paused to tap his chin and thought, "It's lived as long as I have." I turned to look at Francis, but he had an innocent smile. "I'll tell, but only after we spend some more time together." He suckled, teasing me. I could hold back a sigh. I couldn't hold back a sigh. "This would be some big secret. You keep telling me you'll explain, but you haven't even started." He took another curious shrug, rolling his shoulders. It almost seemed perfectly uncute as I felt a light drop on my cheek. I brushed it off, but another one landed there. He seemed to notice as well and looked up to the sky. "It's starting to rain. We should find a place to wait it out. Yes?" I narrowed my eyes, a bit irritated, but didn't speak as we made our way beneath a soft tent. The rain began to come down harder, patting the ground like broken glass. Shadowing from the sky, people that were once there during the day now hurried down the sidewalk, newspapers above heads. But that didn't really do much, and they got wet anyway. There was a soft silence between us, not awkward or forced, but it was comfortable as we watched the rain. It seemed like the sound of the road just for me, but that was just a ridiculous start. I pulled out another chocolate and ate it silently. The rain was pouring now. I don't think I had ever seen something so beautiful. A rainfall by a river in France. The towers were sliding up from afar already as the sun was going down. When Francis had first spoken to me, it was already sunset. Had that much time passed already? I hadn't even been paying attention when I felt myself be hugged from behind. My heart almost jumped out of my chest, and I turned my head to see Francis. Eyes closed as he smiled. His grip around me tightened as his smile widened into a grin. "You don't mind, right?" he muttered, barely audible in the rain.